Welcome to Free Your Children. I am your host, Tiffany Boyd, and today's show is so important that we're just going to jump right into it. I am very thankful that we have our guest joining us today. We have attorney Deborah Stevenson joining us, as well as Diane Connors. And many of you may know that we reside here in the state of Tennessee, for your children, that is. And we have had a very tumultuous last couple of years with trying to protect homeschool freedom in the state of Tennessee. If you follow Free Your Children, you know that our team, our Free Your Children team, drafted legislation, the Free Act, in hopes of better protecting parents and families here in Tennessee. And so here we are. That bill did not pass. And there was also a House Joint Resolution that was filed. And so I brought a constitutional attorney on with us today to discuss why Free Your Children was not in support of that particular House Joint Resolution, and what the climate of homeschooling is currently in Tennessee, and what we should do if we really want to preserve our constitutional rights moving forward. So I am going to let today's guests introduce themselves. We're going to start with attorney Stevenson. Thank you, ladies, for joining us.
Thank you for having us. Yes, I am attorney Stevenson, and I have founded National Home Education Legal Defense many years ago. And I also have homeschooled my two daughters. They're up and grown and successful. I'm currently homeschooling my niece, a 17-year-old niece. So I'm very familiar with the laws, with the Constitution, with homeschooling, and I have been active in trying to protect our rights to freely educate our children in the way that we see fit. I'm here in Connecticut, so I work closely with Diane Connors of Connecticut Homeschool Network. So I'll hand it over to Diane.
All right, thanks. I'm Diane Connors, the founder of Connecticut Homeschool Network, which was founded around 20 years ago. And I've homeschooled most of my 10 children, and now we are homeschooling second generation. So it's interesting, and staying active with what's going on in the state, what's going on in the nation, and it's pretty extreme right now.
That it is. We are watching as a lot of the states are falling to school choice. They're literally falling like dominoes, and we're also seeing a whole lot of overreach in the states targeting specifically homeschooling parents. And you ladies have both been on the Free Your Children show in the past, where we've talked about these things in detail. We know that one of the threats has been the Coalition for Responsible Home Education, and that they lobby legislatures across the United States, hoping to that they can influence them to place more restrictions on homeschooling. And I know that both of you have done tons of work to fight back against that, to make sure that your constitutional rights are maintained and acknowledged in your state. And so I thank you both for the work that you're doing. Would you say that parents in your state are educated on the threats, and is it easy to engage them?
I would go ahead, Diane. You go first.
Yeah, I actually have to leave at 11, so I've got 20 minutes.
Sure.
But I just want to mention a couple of things. As far as the parents in this state, I think they are pretty well informed. We do a lot to reach out to them. What I'm finding is the polarization that is happening politically. Instead of everyone coming to the table together and dealing with the issues, they are wed to a political party, and that's really concerning. And then it's further polarized by the difference between, which is still political, those that want to promote school choice, and those that are stepping back and saying, well, wait a minute, let's look at this, not just in the short term, but the long term. And I recently found out that the Johns Hopkins University is holding a summit, and guess who's got a seat at the table? CRHE.
Course, absolutely.
Yes.
I had not long ago, I penned a piece called "What Their Version of Freedom Looks Like," talking about school choice, and I took snapshots of how damaging it has been in the states where it has been passed. And of course, even more has happened since I penned that article. That was just at the time of me penning that article, and now, that the overreach has continued to expand and grow, because we know that it has tentacles. Which brings me to the topic that I wanted to discuss today. So, you both know that last legislative session, we worked hard to try. We know, and I want to preface this by saying, because I've spoken to both of you ladies about this numerous times, we do not have good homeschool laws in the state of Tennessee. I know that a lot of people think that we do. I know that a lot of people, I've had this said to me before. Well, it's always worked. There's never been a problem in the past. We've always done it. It's okay. I homeschooled my children for, 20 years and they're grown now. We didn't ever feel as if our homeschooling rights were threatened. But fundamentally, the problem in Tennessee is we are still very much under the thumb of the government, and the majority of homeschoolers in the state of Tennessee that homeschool are required, if they want the least government overreach and oversight, they are required to register as under an umbrella school, which legally makes us a private school. And we are not a private school. We are parents who are home educating our children. So I have been advocating for quite a while now that we need to get out from under the umbrella of a private school, and we need our constitutional rights recognized in terms of we are parents that have the constitutional right to home educate our children. So we had tossed around a lot of ideas about what we needed to do in the short term, because we knew that our governor was doing everything in his power to pass school choice legislation, which he did during a special called session. For Your Children was present for that entire special called session. He actually rolled the school choice bill into an omnibus bill, and it was an omnibus bill because ultimately everything that was passed in that bill was attached to the fiscal note. So he rolled it into the aid with the families that were devastated from the flooding in East Tennessee. So if a senator or legislator did not vote for that particular bill, they were also voting against those victims of the flooding in East Tennessee. And there were other things added into that bill as well. So it wasn't just a cut and dry, do you believe that Tennessee should adopt or pass this law that would advance school choice in our state? It wasn't like that. He knew that the bill was not going to pass in that capacity. So that was the reason why he called the special session and embedded it, in with these other things that he knew were polarizing hot topics. And it did pass. And so we knew, they made it clear from the legislative session prior to that the goal was homeschoolers. That was the goal. It was to swallow the homeschooling community, the private education community, and the homeschooling community up into this big school choice scam that they have fed the public and convinced many of them into believing that it is a better option for families. And we know that nothing could be further from the truth because we've seen the strings attached to it. So we filed the Free Act, the Free Act, which would have carved out a separate and distinct category for homeschoolers that would not have been eligible to utilize any government funding of any sort if our bill had passed, and it would have recognized our constitutional right to educate our children that we already have, and we know we already have that right. It would have absolved us from having to register our children, and it would have absolved us from the compulsory attendance laws. And I know that it's always a slippery slope because we weren't asking the government. Our intentions was not to ask the government to give us those rights. It was asking them to acknowledge those rights. And so on the heels of that, a House joint resolution was filed, and it was a House joint resolution. I'm going to see if I can screen share and bring that up. Here it is right here. Can you ladies see that on the screen?
We can see it, but it's very small, hard to read.
Okay, let's
for the audience. I have a copy, but the audience.
Yeah, there we go. I'm going to make it bigger, and hopefully that will help there. So this was a House joint resolution that was filed by Representative Barrett at the time. And Free Your Children was not in support of this House joint resolution. And one of the biggest reasons for us not to support this particular House Joint Resolution was because of a paragraph that was embedded in it. And this particular paragraph talked about how it would have absolved parents from the strings that were going to be attached if they chose to take government funding of any kind. And so I wanted to make sure, and I've heard a lot of arguments swirling around this HJR. And one of the narratives that has been floated around is that this would have been a protection to parents in the state of Tennessee because the 10th Amendment would have allowed them to embed this in the Constitution, and parents would have then been allowed to take this government money, and they could not have been made to follow the strings attached to this money because of the 10th Amendment. And so I wanted a constitutional attorney to come on and discuss this particular point and many others about this particular HJR. So, Attorney Stevenson, what is your professional opinion regarding that narrative?
Well, there's a lot to say, but the 10th Amendment argument is I just have no idea what they're talking about that, because the 10th Amendment basically says, and the 9th, the powers and rights that we have are belong to us and to the states, because we didn't, when we formed the government, the federal government, we did not give to the federal government those every power that exists. The Declaration of Independence says that we are born with inalienable rights. We have them, period. What happened was, when we formed the government, we voluntarily gave some of those rights and powers to the federal government to protect us to live in freedom. And these rights are enumerated, especially the rights to Congress are enumerated in the Constitution specifically. And the federal government has only those rights that are enumerated. Anything that was not enumerated in the Constitution are rights and powers that are left to the states and to the people. So how the 10th Amendment plays into a provision that's in a proposal to amend the state constitution is beyond me. So it's totally irrelevant in my opinion. Now, what they proposed to do was to amend your state constitution, and specifically amend it in Article 11, Section 12. But that article specifically grants, and again, this is mirroring what happened with the federal government. The state governments then gave to some of their voluntary authority, the people did, to the existing government that they formed, and said, here are the powers and rights that we give to you. So if it's not written in the state constitution, then the government of the state does not have that power or that right. This constitution in your state, Article 11, Section 12, it says that the state of Tennessee recognizes the inherent value of education and encourages its support. But then it says, importantly, the General Assembly shall provide for the maintenance, support, and eligibility standards of a system of free public schools. It does not say anything about giving to the General Assembly the power to regulate, adopt laws, or amend constitutions over the education provided in a private school, a non-public school, or a home school. It doesn't give that authority over parents in that manner at all. It just gives the authority over the General Assembly to deal with public schools. So in my opinion, the homeschool statutes that you have on the books, where the General Assembly did adopt a ton of regulations over homeschools and private schools, are all adopted unconstitutionally. So without any authority to do so. So one avenue to protect your rights would be to try to educate your legislators of the powers they do have and they don't have, and to point out that these regulations and statutes that are already adopted were adopted unconstitutionally. And in a case called Marbury versus Madison, the Supreme Court has said any statute that, we're talking about the federal government, applies also to the state government similarly, Any statute that is adopted that conflicts with the Constitution is null and void in and of
Right.
itself,
Right.
because there's no authority over it. All right. So
Yes.
it conflicts with the Constitution. You cannot have a legal statute that conflicts with the Constitution. So that would be an argument to be made
Right.
to educate the legislators and the public in order to try to repeal any unconstitutional statute that you have, not just the homeschool statute, and to try to, and every chance you get to, to kind of voice that emphatically, and
Mhm.
because these legislators take an oath to the state and federal constitutions, and that means something, and they ought to know what they're
It
taking
should
an
mean
oath to.
something.
Yes. Okay.
Diane shaking her head over there. It should mean something. But what we're seeing is that in our state and across the nation as well, is there are multiple legislators that claim that they are constitutionalists, that they are conservative. But what we're seeing is that they are consistently doing things that are unconstitutional, supporting initiatives that are unconstitutional, passing laws that are unconstitutional. And I wanted to, just to clarify, because there has been a lot of dialogue about why Free Your Children did not support this House Joint Resolution. If anyone has followed Free Your Children for any length of time, they know the education that we have attempted to provide to the general public about school choice and the agenda behind school choice and why it is so dangerous. So in this House Joint Resolution, there was a particular paragraph that stated, and I have a copy of it right here, and I'm going to read directly from it. It's short. The rights defined herein shall not be forfeited or waived by the acceptance of any publicly funded education, scholarship, grant, stipend, or voucher provided by the state or any political subdivision thereof. So their argument is that because they have included this in the HJR, that when homeschool families accept school choice funding, that they will be protected from the strings that are attached to that money because of this paragraph that they have included in this House Joint Resolution.
Okay, well, let me say this. When federal money comes to a state, it comes to the state, not to individual people. So it goes to the state first. In that contract, that law, that is basically a contract between the federal government and the state, there are provisions, conditions upon which the state must act in order to receive that pile of money.
Right.
The state is obligated then to those conditions. When the state then gives the money to the people of the state, then those same contractual agreements have to go down there. Otherwise, the state would be breaking their agreement with the federal government.
Yes.
So there's no way, in my opinion, okay, that the state General Assembly can say, because basically the state General Assembly must have, and I have not studied your statutes to this extent, but the money usually goes from the federal government to the executive branch agency involved, like the state education department. But the General Assembly somebody in the state has to agree to accept that money.
Right.
So what authority you have in your state that flows to the Department of Education to agree to accept that money, I don't know. But in any event, they've already agreed. The state, whoever in the state has agreed to accept the terms of that contract, that law, to abide by those terms in obtaining the money.
Yeah.
Then and in distributing the money, there are strings that say how the state can distribute the money and to whom.
Yes, and that is why this money is also attached to the Every Student Succeeds Act. Each state has to have a plan. And in that plan, it outlines many of the strings that are attached to that money. And Tennessee has one. And in order to get that money, I have a copy of it. It's available for anyone to read on the website. And this was one of the reasons why that we tried to explain and educate many of our legislators who thought that this HJR was a good idea, why you could never promise parents that they could accept the money, because when you said it, the money comes to the state and then the state allocates that funding. Well, if you're taking school choice funding, that money is then being allocated to parents who are educating their children privately, and those strings that you mentioned that the state has agreed to follow that money. Is that a good
That's correct.
description of that?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. And so then this, if the state has said in its law, well, we're not going to agree to this part, and so we're going to exempt you people, that would conflict with what they already agreed with. And
Correct.
I highly doubt that they'd be able to keep the money. The state would be able to keep the money in the first place in order to distribute it when someone complains that, hey, you broke our contract.
Right.
So
Absolutely. So that was, and thank you for giving that overview. Would you recommend a state, in your professional opinion, as a constitutional attorney, would you recommend states to write an HJR in an attempt to obtain a constitutional amendment to include verbiage such as
uh, I would not recommend it if a client came to me and said that, because that would, in and of itself, even if it passed and you have that in your state constitution, inevitably that would involve further litigation, because somebody would bring up the fact that, hey, especially the federal government could come in,
Yes.
especially today, would come in
Yes.
and say, no, you have to do as we say because you already signed it and we already gave you the money and you've already spent it.
Mm-hmm.
So you are violating that agreement. So we're going to, demand our money back or do whatever they're going to do in litigation
Right.
to complain.
And
So
if
why
there were
bother?
litigation, if that happened and there were litigation, who has to pay for that litigation?
Gee, that would be the taxpayers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that the general public needs to understand how this process works and why something like this isn't a good idea. It's not, we were never against this HJR because we didn't write it. We were against the HJR because we saw the dangers involved with adding a paragraph like that into the HJR. We understood what they were trying to accomplish with this. However, as you have pointed out numerous times, and anytime we have a conversation, we already have the rights to home educate our children free from government control. We knew that when we drafted the FREE Act. The problem is, in the state of Tennessee, we don't have any constitutional attorneys that I'm aware of that's willing to step up to the plate and say, none of this is constitutional. It's all unconstitutional. We need to start chipping away at what the state of Tennessee is doing by refusing to acknowledge the constitutional rights of parents in our state.
Well, I would like to say this. Do not rely on attorneys. Rely on yourself, okay?
Exactly. Yes.
And each parent can stand up, because the Constitution was written for individual parents to understand and enforce, okay?
Absolutely.
So that would be one thing. But I would like to say Diane has had a lot of experience in researching the school choice situation. So maybe she could, join in the conversation about that.
We definitely want to hear from you. What's your opinion about including a paragraph like that in an HJR in an attempt to try to embed it in the state constitution?
No. For all the reasons that were just mentioned, but
Yeah.
And as far as the school choice aspect of it goes, it's not a solution. There's an article that was just published, I believe this morning, possibly yesterday, about the academic scores across America have hit an all-time, a 20-year low. So that's very concerning. And they're now saying that, no, you cannot blame all of this on COVID. That low is there. It was headed there and it's continued. So what are they going to do about it? And at the end of the article, the author said, this is why we must have school choice option. And I'm like, no, because once that happens, as we know, and the listeners might be learning when they hear this, is once you accept the money, You're going from a homeschool family that has privately funded your child's education as well as privately controlled it. It's directed by them and how they choose to set it up. All of that changes when you start accepting the money. And as far as saying, oh, no, you're safe, no strings for you because you're a homeschooler, well, that has not held water for more than 5 years anywhere else. And there are countries that now no longer have homeschooling at all. This is
Correct.
happening in this country as a last recourse, not a first one. So if that all happens across the country, it's going to become publicly controlled and publicly funded by an incredibly failing system. Why would anybody in their right mind want that? There's another article that was just published, and they're projecting that in 5 years, within 5 years, by 2030, at least 50% of all students that are school age will be homeschooled.
Mhm.
So, in my opinion, looking at the behaviors from different legislatures, they're threatened.
Yes,
They're very
absolutely.
threatened, and the unions are threatened, and they're lashing out against homeschoolers all across this country. And people in organizations like CRHE are making hay from this. So
I agree.
we're
We're seeing it. We are seeing it. You know, the whole reason that our legislators gave for not passing the Free Act was that if we were given, now listen to this, ladies, if parents in Tennessee were given true educational autonomy, it would lead to sex trafficking and child abuse. Now, who does that sound like?
CRHE, possibly?
Exactly. We had the chair of one of our education committees where our bill was being heard read a letter from a judge stating pretty much the tenets of that, and I have it on the YouTube channel where people can go and listen to it. So we are being framed already as guilty of being child abusers, of sex trafficking our children, of not providing them with an appropriate education. We are guilty before we've ever gone to trial. Are you seeing that as a nationwide problem?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. Very similar to what's happening right here in Connecticut.
Yes.
You know, they're reflecting back on 2018 from Matthew Tirado, who was never homeschooled, and the current February, March 2025, this year, the incident in Waterbury with a child who was kept home. He was not withdrawn to homeschool. No such document has appeared. And the mom actually told the principal that he was going to be enrolled in the Wolcott district instead. And the principal followed up. He was never enrolled there. And the state agencies did not follow up appropriately and do anything about it. And they're conflating that with homeschooling. It has nothing to do with homeschooling. Just because he was a prisoner in his home, that's not homeschooling.
Exactly.
You know, the parents are pulling their kids out nationwide in record numbers because of what's happening in the schools. The children are not safe in those schools. It's up as high as 20% of the children are being sexually abused and physically abused by the adults in the schools.
Yeah.
And from peer to peer, the issues are 40 to 70%. That a child from K through 12 is going to experience bullying, which sometimes leads to suicide.
Yes.
So tell me again how homeschooling is unsafe.
Exactly.
Or that our kids are failing academically or inadequately educated. It's simply not true.
It's not.
It's as false as the narrative that they used to run years ago about, well, those kids aren't socialized. It wasn't true then. This isn't true now. And
I think I'm glad you brought this up, Diane, because what I see happening, because, you know, my ministry for your children is nationwide. So we have these conversations all the time on social media, and we always have public school crowd immediately they found us. What is that they say when trolls find you and they start weighing in on the conversations on your page, you know that you've really struck a nerve and that people are really watching, what you're doing. Well, we have arrived at that crossroads, I guess. And so we get a lot of people who are now following our social media pages, and they immediately in with the accusations that homeschool families are abusers. But when I stop the deflection, say, no, you're not, if this is the discussion that you really want to have, let's talk about the educator abuse that is happening in the public school system. The fact that they're allowed to self-report, the fact that they are not policing the very system that they are in charge of. Let's talk about all of that. Let's talk about the disciplinary reports in your state against your teachers. Let's talk about the large numbers of educators and school employees that are being arrested on a daily basis for sex crimes or abuse crimes. But those are the discussions that no one is willing to have, even our legislators. Are you seeing that in Connecticut?
Yeah, we are definitely seeing it, and I'm going to have to turn that over to Debbie because I need to step out, but thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. We appreciate all the work that you're doing in Connecticut. Send me the links to the articles that you were referencing, Diane, and I will be happy to post those as well. And anytime you need what is going on in Connecticut highlighted, please send it to me, and I will be happy to get that information out for you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
To answer your question, is it happening in Connecticut? Yes, it's happening in Connecticut. It's happening all over. But a couple of points to make about homeschoolers being hidden. That's not true, because if you're homeschooling and you go out to the grocery store, or you go take your children to the doctor, or you go wherever to church, there, I don't know about in your state law, but in our state law, probably, every profession you can think of is a mandated reporter.
Correct. That's correct in Tennessee as well.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So the children that are homeschooled interact with many more mandated reporters than the children in the public schools who stay in, maybe in the lower grades with one teacher. Maybe they see the nurse, but if those two people don't pick up on anything, at least they're out in the community, and you can see that. But the time, the flexibility of time is very different when you're homeschooling, to be out in the community, seeing many more mandated reporters than it is when the child is in school for however 6 hours a day plus their after school activities. Then they go home, eat dinner, and the whole thing happens again. And on the weekends, you're back at the school activities for sports or whatever. So they're interacting with the same people, whereas we're interacting with the world, and that's very different.
Exactly. And if your children are enrolled in a public school system and you have alerted the school system, or the child has alerted the school system, or the school system has noticed that there's something going on, and they have handled it internally, which we know because we have statistics dealing with that as well. If they are handling it internally and then they're bringing the teacher in and they're allowing that teacher to resign, and they are not turning it into local authorities where they have an opportunity to do an external investigation and decide if charges need to be filed and if that person, needs to be held accountable for their actions in that regard. Oftentimes these teachers, when they're allowed to resign, or these school employees, then move to another district, and then the same thing happens there. And this is happening time and time again. So the mandated reporters who are literally tasked with protecting these children, then in turn are participating in a system that is consistently abusing the children that are placed in their care.
That is true. I have 2 points to make about that. In Connecticut, this latest story that happened in Connecticut that Diane was referring to, in Waterbury, where this child was enrolled in the public school for 5 full years, and everyone, according to the principal of the school, in an interview with a reporter, Everyone, he said, in the school knew the child was starving. Okay. He would steal lunches. He would go through garbage cans to get food. He was starving. Now, to their credit, the school, the principal and maybe some other people there reported it to the proper authorities, to Department of Children and Families in our state. Well, and what did that agency, that state agency do? Well, according to the police records now, well, first let me say, the child was kept home for the next 20 years and was starved for 20 years by his stepmother, alleged stepmother. I mean, alleged perpetrator.
Right. After the proper government authorities had been
Had been
notified.
alerted, right?
Yes.
So what did DCF do and the police do? They went out to this house twice. Now, the police interviewed the child, now man, and it come to find out, according to that statement, which was under oath, the child was told by the alleged perpetrator, stepmother, that when DCF comes to the door, you better say everything is okay, or else I'm going to withhold more food from you and lock you up even more hours. Okay. So when the police came twice, and they sat in the living room, oh, everything's fine. And yeah, everything's fine, the child said, and that was the extent of their investigation. Period. For the next 20 years, that child was locked away and nearly died, and he had to set his house on fire in order to escape. That's how he escaped. He saved himself, not the state agencies. So
Yeah.
Even if you report it, that's problematic, that anything
Well,
will happen.
absolutely. And then when we look at the track record of DCS or whatever acronym they're using in whatever state that they may be in, there are thousands and thousands of children that are unaccounted for in the foster care system. So I think the fundamental issue with this is you're coming after parents who aren't guilty and accusing them of committing crimes that they are not committing, but you are not taking care, you're not overseeing, you are not protecting the children that are in the system that you are supposed to have legal oversight over. So,
right. And the second point I was going to make is that when that argument comes up, if you are armed with statistics, that would be very helpful. So it's rare to find a state where they have the statistics on the public school system of how many kids who are within the public school system either are reported being abused by their parents or by the school administration. If you can get those statistics and then compare the same statistics with how many homeschoolers were reported, I don't know what that outcome would be, but I guarantee you that would be impactful for the public to hear.
Absolutely. And the problem is they're not reporting those statistics. That's the real problem. And instead of legislators doing something to protect those children, instead they are attacking parents, law-abiding parents who just want to utilize their constitutional right to educate their children as they see fit. And Free Your Children is a Christian ministry, but that constitutional right is not just afforded to Christians. And that's another aspect that I do not think that people want to talk about when we talk about the homeschooling community, because the narrative is that it's all religious fanatics that are homeschooling their children, locking them away and abusing their children. But that's not what the face of homeschooling looks like. The face of homeschooling is very diverse, and it is comprised of families of all different faiths, all different ethnic backgrounds. And so it's not just your Christian homeschoolers that are the only people who are wanting to exercise their constitutional right to home educate their children. What would you say about the face of homeschooling now, Attorney Stevenson, as compared to what it looked like in the past? Are you seeing a more diverse community?
Well, absolutely today, but it depends how far back you go, because this thing we call homeschooling is just what parents normally did for eons. Okay, they brought up their child,
they
and
parented their children.
educated them.
Yes.
Yeah, that was normal. And then,
Right.
then in the 1800s, then, okay, we have the compulsory attendance laws in public schools and all this
Yeah.
nonsense. And then, it faded away that, oh, it's normal to instruct your own child, oh, no, you have to go to the public school or a private school. But then there was the argument, oh, well, homeschooling is not legal. No, that's what we have always done. That is
Right.
the norm. Public
Yes.
school is not the norm.
Right.
Okay. So that has to be instructed to the legislators,
Mhm.
and have them understand what this is. This is
Right.
just a nickname we called what every parent has done
Correct.
eternally. Okay.
Correct. It's
So
conditioning of sorts, wouldn't you
yes.
say?
Yes. But when it came more in vogue and we remembered we have this right, you're right. It started out a lot with the Christians,
Mhm.
but today, no, as Diane was saying, people are escaping in
Yes.
droves from the public schools because
Yep.
they do not operate
Mhm.
effectively. There are so many mandates, that people have legislated that you have to teach this, that, and the other thing that really and it's one system fits all.
Yes.
The reason why homeschooling works is effective is because it's a flexible, individual, tutorial kind of system where you can meet the needs of your children, whether it's at home or with tutors or wherever.
Right. Absolutely.
That can't happen in the public school. So the
No.
kids who don't have the fortune to be able to homeschool are stuck in that system.
Mhm.
And that's why you see all the horrible things that happen, because think of it this way, if you had to stay at your employment for the rest 12 years,
Right.
even though you didn't it was not a good match, you didn't weren't
Mhm.
able to work, you weren't able to think, it was crushing you,
Mhm.
what would you do if you could not escape?
Right.
You'd act out, you
Yes.
wouldn't comply,
Mhm.
you would do lots of things that we see today. And then you would be even, the hammer would come down even harder on you for acting out. So
Absolutely.
that's part of the problem. But yes, all of those people, it doesn't matter who you are in the public school,
Mhm.
whatever, nationality, whatever background, doesn't matter. If you're being crushed, you need an escape. And the
Absolutely.
only escape left
Yep,
is
we
in
are. We are.
schools.
I have said over and over again that homeschooling is the last frontier of freedom. We're it, and they know that,
Absolutely.
and that's why they're coming down on us so hard. And I will say this too, because in this discussion, getting back to the HJR that we did not support, and we've outlined in the show reasons why. One, I've had people contact me. They have had conversations with other individuals, primarily attorneys, have told them, you don't understand, you can't understand this because you're not an attorney.
Oh, that's baloney.
This
That is
can be
total baloney.
protected. This is a built-in protection
Mhm.
for parents in the state of Tennessee, and you can't understand this because you're not an attorney. But we read it. A group of homeschool parents who are not attorneys sat
Mhm.
down and read this HJR when we were asked if we would support this particular piece of legislation that was going to be, brought up. And when we read it, we immediately knew that that particular section of the HJR was an issue, and we knew why. And the reason we knew why is because we'd done our research. We had read the state's ESSA plan. We understood the strings attached to school choice. We understand how federal funding works and all the different departments that it's flowing through, and what the states have to give up when they accept that money, because they are giving up their autonomy.
Mhm.
Tennessee has not turned down that federal funding. Our state has not turned down that federal funding. They are still accepting that federal funding. So, therefore, that money is attached to strings. And
Mhm.
so, what do you say to legislators or to attorneys who are telling parents, let us handle it? We're attorneys. We may be elected representatives in your legislature, or elected somewhere within your legislature, whether it be Congress or Senate or just a House rep. What do you say to the parents who are listening to these politicians tell them, let us handle it? We know what we're doing, because there are a lot of attorneys that are, serving, that have been elected by their constituents to serve. What do you say to those legislators and to those families that are being told, sit back, let us handle it. You can't possibly understand this because you're not an attorney. What would be your advice to those people?
Don't be bullied, number one. Vote them out, number two. Okay. But I want to tell you that I was not, when I started advocating for freedom to homeschool, I was just a parent of young kids. That's it. And what I was being told at that time, oh, well, the law says this and that, and you have to, whatever. And I'm like, and I was looking for attorneys, and I couldn't find any, right? And so I sat around the kitchen table with a couple of my friends, and then I read and reread our state statute. And I'm saying, that doesn't sound anywhere near what these people were telling me, what these, legislators or whoever or attorney were. It didn't. What they did was they took one piece of the statute here and a piece later here and then stuck them together and said that was the law. Do not believe anyone but yourself. Do your own research. NHELD has been saying this for years, to empower yourselves. Don't take my word for it. Don't take anyone's word for it. Look up the law for yourself, see what it says, and put it in their face and say, I
Absolutely.
understand this. Okay.
Absolutely.
And that's why I became a lawyer, was because I hate lawyers. Okay. And that's the truth. And so I said, this doesn't make sense. I can read that.
Mhm.
They're not telling the truth.
Right.
Something's got to be done. And, I've been doing this for eons now.
Yeah.
So trust yourself, empower yourself. Don't believe what they're telling you unless you have checked it out and gotten it from the original source. And the original source would be the federal Constitution, the Federalist Papers that explain the federal Constitution, and the Anti-Federalist Papers. And then your state constitution, and look up the records about how that was adopted, each provision, the legislative history of that, how that was adopted, the speeches, if you have a recording of that from time to time, in the amendments, then you are educated. You
Yes.
are homeschooling yourself, basically.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I'm so glad those are wonderful words of advice and wisdom as well. When I've been traveling across the state of Tennessee and other states as well, trying to educate families to give them so that they can better protect their own families. This is what's happening in your state. This is what's happening in our nation. But I always preface it by saying, do not leave here and say, well, this is happening because Tiffany Boyd said so. You leave here and you do your own research.
That's
You
right.
should always do your own research. And if it is an organization, if it is an individual, if it is an elected official, if they are telling you to sit down and allow them to handle it on your behalf, that is a red flag, in my
Yep.
opinion. That is a
Absolutely.
huge red flag. It is our civic responsibility to be educated on these topics and to work to preserve our own freedoms. And in addition to that, to hold those that are elected or seeking election accountable. And that's
Absolutely.
your job. That is your job as a citizen of the United States. And I really believe that is the reason why we are in the position that we're in today. And I will also say that people, especially people who have certain agendas, whether they be political or whether it be that they are seeking a position that requires a political agenda in order to be able to advance to that position, if don't allow those individuals to control the narrative. You have to understand that sometimes their agenda may not be what your agenda is, which may be freedom, as in the case of Free Your Children. And you need to understand that so that you can better protect your rights, and always get informed, do your research and do your work. So
Absolutely. And I know that it has an effect. And here's
yes.
how. I always tell that same thing to everybody I meet, including legislators. And there was one legislator in Connecticut that would let me go in and talk to him a lot. Okay. So, but I'd always emphasize the Constitution and whether it was constitutional or not. And I said, every legislator should be thinking first before you vote on anything. Do I have the constitutional authority to act on this, even though it's a good idea?
Mm-hmm.
Do I have the authority to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at the Constitution, the legislature should look at the Constitution and say, well, what does the state and federal Constitution say that I can do as a legislator? If
Mm-hmm.
it's not in there and you don't have the authority, this, no matter how good the legislation is, you need to say, no, I don't have the authority, can't do it. And I repeated that often to him. And in the end, years later, he said, every time I sat there and a bill would come forward, it's like you were sitting on my shoulder saying, do I have the authority to do this? So never rule out the impact you will have when you keep, talking to people and your legislator and emphasizing the Constitution, because it is important. They hope they take an oath to it, and they better darn well apply it correctly.
Absolutely. Well, I want to say thank you for all the work that you've done in Connecticut, but also for the organization that you founded. Tell our followers again where to find you, the name of that organization, so that, and I will make sure that I drop those links as well into the description of the interview.
Sure. It's National Home Education Legal Defense, or NHELD, and it's nheld.us, where you can find our website. We also have a Facebook page. Don't ask me how you get to that. I don't know, but look for it. But nheld.us, not .com, and you will find a lot of articles and information there. And feel free to contact me anytime.
Well, again, thank you so much for being willing to join us here today. It's been a fantastic discussion with tons of great information to help empower and encourage and equip families, again, to better protect their freedoms. And I do want to say, if you are not following For Your Children on all the social media platforms, please look for us, because we're there. Check out our website at freeyourchildren.com. Sign up for our free newsletter. You can also find us on Substack as well. Our next speaking engagement is actually next Saturday in Sumner County, Tennessee. The details of that event can be found over again on our website, freeyourchildren.com. We appreciate all of our followers. Thank you so much for helping spread our message. If you are interested in hosting a seminar in your area, no matter where you are in the United States, please send us an email and we will be happy to get that information to you. We definitely believe that we are in a battle for the souls of our nation's children, and we're also in a battle for the last frontier of freedom, which is homeschooling. And we are trying to do everything in our power to educate the general public as quickly as possible so we can continue to preserve our constitutional right to home educate our children, and essentially just to parent our children the way that we see fit as individuals who are living in a constitutional republic. We know that there are great battles being waged all across the United States in an attempt to destroy those freedoms. And For Your Children is working as hard and fast as we can to get that information out there, because we believe that we are stronger as a collective unit. And we also believe that we have a voice, and we hope that you will exercise that voice and exercise your rights. Get educated, do your research, and then speak up and take action, because that's what it's going to take to change the tide. Would you agree with that, Attorney Stevenson?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, once again, thank you to all of our dedicated For Your Children followers. When you watch this podcast, please make sure that you share it, that you give it a like. Make sure that you're following us on YouTube, on Rumble, and again, on all of our social media platforms. And I want to leave this by saying that we love you here at For Your Children, but Jesus loves you so much more. God bless.